Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 7th and 8th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline Comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam! Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Creating beyond calculation, beyond politics, and beyond the big two. Welcome, Silverliners, to the wonderful world of Wednesday Wham. I'm your host, Dean Zachary, and we're joined tonight by Rob Davis, the paragon of pencils, Aaron the Contrarian Humphreys, one of the Wizards of Wordplay, Scott Wakefield. Rory is apparently without internet this evening. I don't know what that means.
Likely excuse.
Yeah, a likely excuse. The Empress of the Inks is missing tonight. She had other royal duties, so we'll be without her this evening. Tonight's subject is time travel. Is it good? Is it bad? Does it help when it's well written? Does it overcomplicate? What are your favorite stories, including time travel, and which ones could you do without? I'm going to just start by throwing it out to my enigmatic, sometime co-host, always co-host, and sometimes substitute host, Scott.
Sometimes here, co-host.
Yeah. I guess that works too. So, talk to us a little bit about time travel. You said a little bit off camera that it's not your favorite storytelling device. Tell us why.
I feel like it has the potential to fly out of control very quickly. I also feel now this isn't always, because sometimes it can be done well. I'm not saying all the time, because we will discuss and we will. I'm sure I'll be surprised by plots that I've loved that had time travel, but most of the time, I feel like it's a crutch for solving problems that they didn't know how to solve, or I don't want to say lazy, but because sometimes it takes a lot of thought, but sometimes it's just like, oh, how about time travel? And we'll spice things up. We could either introduce a child into our show or have time travel, one or the others, and then it's going to fall off, fly off the rails. And I very often I feel like it's not done well. Case in point, I literally got up from the couch and left the living room when the TV show Lost, introduced time travel. I was done. It was my show. My wife and I were loving it. And at the time we lived in Hawaii, so it was like, wow, they're filming right over there. That's kind of cool. Yeah. Time travel. And I threw up my hands. I said, "I love you, darling. I'm going to go read a book." And I couldn't do it. It just. But I guess because Lost was just like one more thing for Lost. It was they had so many just everything in the show. They just threw it all in there, and then they added time travel. I feel like it's too much to manage, and then you're left with. I mean, we could pick apart. It's just like opening the door to pick apart. But what or why didn't they? Or if I had a time machine, I mean, like in Harry Potter, right? I mean,
sure.
Sorry, opening the Harry Potter door, they got a time machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why not go? I always say go back farther. Give yourself. Why do they always give themselves like 10 minutes to solve the problem?
Sure.
Back to the Future did it well because it was an accident. I like that.
Right.
And it worked. It was Back to the Future does it really well, but they're still left with. There's so many things they could have done differently. And it doesn't make sense.
Yes.
And if you really want to nitpick, now for just a fun story, okay.
Yeah.
But in general, my answer is I don't really like it.
We're gonna pick that back up after we have some greeting time here. Calculus says you guys are back again. I see. We can't help it. We just keep getting dragged into this. It's something that's an OCD thing. We can't not do it. We also have the best of all time, Bill and Ted's excellent.
I'm inclined to perhaps not agree, but I know the source, and I can't. He knows me. I can't. I'll respectfully allow him to have his opinion.
Absolutely. Let me throw in another sub question to you, Scott, before we move on to the other two folks. What do you think about should interference be allowed or not allowed? There's something, some stories you can interfere, some stories you cannot. Some stories it is the actual intention of the plot that they interfere. Does that make it better or worse for you if there's a no interference clause?
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I feel like that limits the variables.
Okay.
Because that whole butterfly effect. But there's I think Michael Crichton's, was it Timeline? One of the scientists in that book says, "That's crazy. You're like a voice in a stadium. Your one little action can't affect the course of time."
Right.
I'm always like, well, what if you kill somebody really important? Doesn't that? And then there was the paradox if you go back and kill your grandparents, and then you can't. You immediately wink out back. How's that? And then you wouldn't.
I know. How's that? Yeah, I know. It's
I don't know. But it's just it's so many things to manage. Maybe that's just because of me. Like as a storyteller, like I don't think I could write a mystery novel because I'm. You got to have a really smart detective. Well, then who's creating that smart detective? This idiot. I can't do that. So then time travel, and I'd be like I'd have sticky notes and 3x5 cards and file folders of all the things that I have to keep track of in a time travel story, and
just do what the pretentious British writers do, like Grant Morrison and Alan Moore. Just make it up and then go, what do you mean you didn't figure that out? The clues were already there. What are you, a moron? Calculus says the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2012 had a good time travel arc. Why they can't just keep going back or go back further? Yes, that's a good way of saying it. If you kill John Wilkesville, you could make difference easily.
I think it's that Booth. John Wilkes Booth. Is that an autocorrect?
Yes, indeed. So, Aaron, because you're here with us for a limited time, I want to get your take as well. Talk to us about, maybe a time travel story that does work for you, and then one that doesn't, and why on both of them.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I like Back to the Future. I just think time travel is conceit for the story. In other words, you could go mad trying to get all the variables, but like Back to the Future, it's just to tell a story. Again, this is how people pick apart any movies. Well, he could have done this. He could have done this. I'm like, yes, at the time and the point in the movie, the person could have done 1,001 things to make the situation better. The point is he didn't. He chose that. That's the point. When people constantly go back, right. If we constantly go back to movies, hey, we could have done this. We could have done that. And it's like, yes, that's a way to ruin the story. So that doesn't work. So the time travel, you could say he went back and did that. I'm more curious. I've had discussions with my friend more like, is time a real thing or not?
Interesting.
Even that, could you even go back in time? Is time an illusion? In other words, do we sense the concept of time through the movement of objects? In other words, if you're in a room and nothing's moving, you have no sense of time. Aging is another sense of time, decay, things.
Yeah.
So is time a real property, like light or something, or like phenomena, or is it its own, or is it just an illusion created? I tend to go more towards an illusion.
Well, maybe a construct,
yeah,
Aaron,
a construct
that we have built to help us understand existence in a way that doesn't make our minds explode.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think also
to
give an idea that something's moving towards something, because if we realize that nothing, if the future technically didn't matter, if there was no future, it was only now, then it would take. I mean, this is why. I mean, not that I won't get into this, but even fate versus free will. I mean, most scientists believe everything is fated. We don't have choice.
Right.
But that's depressing, and it takes all will to do anything. So even if choice is an illusion, it's a great illusion, and it keeps us getting up in the morning, right?
Well,
it's a strange thing to try to wrap your brain around.
I do like time travel stories that have singularities built into the concept. In other words, that there are certain points in evolutionary history of any species that will happen. Terminator did this.
Terminator,
a Dark Fate. It was like, it was inevitable that we would create a self-aware AI, whether it was Skynet or in the future, just natural progression of research in the artificial intelligence or just science itself will produce certain things regardless. Like we will eventually, possibly, over time develop teleportation, faster than light speed. I mean, these are things that if we just go down this path, it's a natural progression where there are certain like bookmarks or benchmarks that we're going to hit. Yeah. And so I did always like the idea, like in Terminator, she went back and stopped Skynet, but all she did was kick the ball down the field. You can't stop something that is a natural course of time. Right. And I always thought that was an interesting idea, that you could prepare yourself for what's coming, but you can't stop it. Evolution.
You may delay it.
Right. You can't stop the evolution of actual time itself and the progression of things. And I always think that's an interesting idea. I like that. And my Terminator did that with Dark Fate. And but the idea of change, I mean, of course, Einstein says time and past, future, and present all happen at the same time. That there was time and space is just laid out all before you. And you literally walk into a different part in the board, not really going to the future, just going to a different part in like the board.
In terms of stories, though, I would venture a guess that being an X-Men fan, you would also like one of my favorite time travel stories.
Days of Future Past.
Days of Future Past. Yeah,
that was my favorite. I thought the movie just ruined it.
I like the actual.
They have a tendency to do that.
They do that. Yeah, the Chris Claremont, the original. Yeah.
It was only 2 issues too. I mean, it's not even a long story. It's like a 2-issue
thing.
It's
a 2-issue thing, but it was so compelling because of the content and the way it was drawn. And
they also did the sort of idea of like, is it inevitable that that mutants will be put in prison camps? Magneto would think so. But the fact, like, can you stop the future? So I mean, I like Back to the Future because it's lighthearted. So I don't think about the time travel stuff.
It's fun. It's fun. Yeah, it's a romp.
I did see a horror, but it wasn't a time travel story. It was a time loop story. It was one of the best horror stories I've ever seen. And I don't know where I saw it on HBO or one of these movie channels in the 90s. I don't even know where. It was like a 30-minute, an hour-long show. I don't know if it was part of a TV series. I've never been able to find it again.
Oh, wow.
It just starts out with this guy in a street corner waiting for the bus. And he goes up on his day, and then it shows a clock. And once he reaches 1 hour, I think it's hour or 2 hours, he's back at the bus stop. And as he goes through trying to figure out what's going on, he finally reads in the paper that in some small section of the paper that some scientists are actually have realized there's some sort of time phenomenon happening and they're going to study it or whatever. So he finally makes it to the scientists, and within 2 hours, he makes it there. And he's, asking the scientists, can you help me? Can you do anything? Can you stop this? Can you get me out of it? And they said, we don't know what it is. We don't know. And the show just ends with him on the bus stop.
That's creepy.
So I mean, he is stuck in time for 2 hours, like a 2-hour time loop, forever. You can't die.
Yeah,
that's like you think like how far can you make it in 2 hours?
Right.
You can't age. You can't die. You can never have any fulfilling events in life. You can't move forward.
Yeah, he's in hell.
It's hell.
Yeah,
it is literally hell. I mean, when I stopped that, I'm like, that is literally the best way to turn time into a literal prison.
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have no idea where that came from. I can't find that story again. Some people thought it might have been like an Outer Limits story or something, but I keep searching for it. I've never been
like
able to
one,
find it. That's what it sounds like, and I think that's what
you know.
it is. But
It reminds me a little bit of the Edge of Tomorrow, the Tom Cruise movie, where he's stuck in the same day where he dies at the end of the day.
That was a manga. I think it's Kill
Right.
Repeat.
Live, Die, Repeat.
Live, Die, Repeat, or something. Yeah.
Live, Die, Repeat. Yeah.
But they did a good job with the movie. I thought they did a really good job with the movie.
I think so too. If I may venture into the literary world for just a moment, my favorite book from H.G. Wells was The Time Machine.
Yeah.
And I really like the fact that he explores the far future. And, it's obviously it's a cautionary tale, but one of the things I loved about it was how eerie and scary it was. It really is compelling, and it gave you the feeling of those early Star Trek episodes where they would go literally where no one has gone before. And it was, there was an eeriness to it. There was a cosmic mystery to it.
I've always
H.G. Wells captured.
Yeah. Well, I've always found it weird that every time you see time travel stories, they very rarely ever go to the future. They always go to the past.
Yeah, because they're trying to fix something or change something or
change something. But if you had a time machine, I'm going to the future. I don't care about the past. I can read that in books. I want to go see what's going to be. The only other time
you
I
have to
would
be
visit,
careful how far you go, because you won't.
Yeah, there might not be an Earth there.
Because you won't be able to understand anybody.
Well, there's also the idea that
it changes.
Yeah. Well, there's also that you can like travel into the future into something. There's also, I think people have talked about the idea that if you travel into the future for a stationary point, that you literally end in space because Earth has traveled out from you.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of interesting ideas you can do.
I love that technology. This is one of those things like we talked about, like if you can't explain the technology, don't. H.G. Wells clearly didn't even try, because the time machine doesn't even explain anything. All he does is say, I pushed the lever forward and I pushed the lever farther forward and time sped up.
Yes.
And then slowed it down.
Right. Pops says,
technically, the amount of energy
say, hey, Pops,
we would have to do to time travel is beyond anything we can even comprehend. I mean, is like the idea, is time travel possible?
Right.
I would think if you were able to harness a star, if you were stage 3 civilization where you're harnessing stars almost like you're like through a Dyson sphere or something, maybe, but it's just way too much energy. I mean, you have to be harnessing the energy of black holes in order to pull that off.
If you slingshot,
that's the only
use a tachyon field.
If you go
tachyon field,
tachyon field could slingshot around. Yes,
unless there's some
the whales
we have yet to find. And there could be a natural loophole of things that we have not discovered yet. I mean, there's loopholes.
True. I want to move on to our guest here tonight, Roberta.
Hi, Roberta.
How are you?
Hello. I'm good.
Tonight. And I'd love to hear your take on favorite time travel, not so favorite, and why on both of them.
Ooh, I don't know if I have a total favorite, but going along with the H.G. Wells thing, there's been some movies about it that have been fairly good.
Yes,
I'd say, and also I just found by accident, I don't know how, but they restarted Quantum Leap.
How fun!
Yeah, and they immediately canceled it. Unfortunately, I just heard they canceled it too, which I was like, "Wow, really that fast?" But
that fast?
They did a good job with it too, which is really a shame.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looked interesting. I didn't know where it was on TV. I just saw an ad, they're resurrecting it, and then the next thing I know, they actually did this in Wizard once. They in the back have jokes. It was a mean joke, but it was funny. It was like the amazing first issue of Hawkman, sensational issue #1. Get it now, and then it's like turn the page, like issue 2 is like the last issue of Hawkman. Get it now before it's got. It's like that's mean, but it's funny.
Mean, but
isn't
somewhat
that
accurate.
terrible?
It is terrible.
I was waiting on someone to bring this up.
Yes.
Superman flying around the Earth in the other direction was the worst.
Oh yeah.
Just turn the book back. That's because that's how it works. As if we understand how it really works.
That was so funny about the Superman movies. I loved them as a kid. I think like Christopher Reeves captured the character of Superman. But really I still remember him throwing the plastic S from his chest in #2, like catching. Do you guys remember that? Like they just made stuff up that he could do.
Great, wasn't it?
It was the time travel backwards. I mean, people thought, could you actually do that? I'm like, well, you could turn the Earth backwards, I guess, but
why would time go backwards?
Time wouldn't go backwards.
Wouldn't the sun, everyone would just be annoyed, and the tides would be messed up. And
right.
Well, I think a lot of people got into it with the Back to the Future movies.
Yeah, time travel.
You know,
yes, those were fun.
It was a big first step on what could you do and what would happen, and you found out you would start disappearing.
Yeah. I like the fact that Aaron mentioned it earlier, the conceit idea that it's really probably not a good idea to try to explain much about it, but make sure that the story is interesting and compelling enough to where we forget and we don't care about how.
Willing
we just want to watch these
of disbelief. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's why they actually they were when they originally made Back to the Future, when they're writing the script, the time machine was going to be like a refrigerator or something.
Yeah.
And it was, I can't remember how, but somebody had the idea of like, well, why don't we just make it into a car? And I don't know if the DeLorean was on set, if that was the initial idea of the DeLorean, but the idea was like, well, yeah, if you have something that can travel forward, it's traveling through time. And so, and they said it actually just completely remade the movie.
Oh,
because the fact that you are literally using something that can travel and it get fast enough and it goes through time.
Oh, yeah. That was
because I think they were basing it more like on H.G. Wells' Time Machine. Where he sits in the chair, he holds the lever, and he goes back in time, like a static object. But when they were like, "Well, no, this thing needs to actually be moving," and I'm like, "That's a cool."
Yes.
And it almost changed the way that you view time travel instead of because most time travel before then you sit in one place and the time or things change around you as you go back in time.
But you gotta hope for no erosion and stuff like that, right?
Back to the Future, it almost feels like you're traveling fast enough to break through a barrier, almost like breaking the sound barrier.
Sound barrier.
Which I thought was a really cool concept. Like you go really fast enough, you can like crack through time.
Yeah, that helped. I think communicate it to the average audience as well.
And it made it more kinetic and exciting.
It did. It really did. Calculus says that reversing the Earth would just kill everyone. Yeah, of course.
Basically, what you would do is probably mess up the. You might mess up the electromagnetic field, but you would.
Everything like. Yeah, there'd be so much that would just, everything's in a stasis. It would just stop. There's an onion. Sorry,
we go flying off into space.
There's an Onion article about that scene where he holds up his phone. It's calling Chuck Berry. This is that sound you've been looking for. If you look it up, the Onion, Johnny B. Good, and he says Marvin held up the phone and I heard the song that would make me famous. Then I stole it.
That's so sad.
I love it. That's great. That's great. Rob, we haven't heard from you yet, my friend. Love to hear your take on a favorite, a not so favorite, and why on both of them.
Well, probably my favorite. It fits together here. Probably my favorite Avengers story is Avengers number 8, where Kang the Conqueror travels through time back to present day Earth and takes on the Avengers. He wants to rule the world. He's a man from the future, and it's and the way that story unfolds and the way it's told by Jack Kirby is just an incredible story. And that got woven into some other stories that Jack Kirby had done. One in two different stories in Fantastic Four, in that the Fantastic Four in, I've got it listed here somewhere. Yeah, in issue number 5, Dr. Doom sends them back into time to get this chest full of magical gems or some sort of treasure that he needs, and he sends the Fantastic Four back in time, and they come back to the future again. And you'd have to read the story to get. And I didn't read it. I just kind of looked it up to see where it was. But I think what happens is they trick him once they come back with the treasure. They don't actually come back with what he asks them to get. And that was like the first. That actually happened before the Avengers issue did. So that was the first time travel story in the 1960s Marvel universe. And then later on issue 19, essentially another time traveler goes back to the age of the pharaohs, and the Fantastic Four are sent back, and eventually they reveal in the Marvel universe that Kang and Ramatut were the same person. That got resolved because
did you ever read
all the time travel stories kind of got linked together in that way. There was another character in the Avengers called Immortus, who is also said to be the same character and or person, who is either an ancestor of Reed Richards or Doctor Doom or both. So there's all that. So that whole thing just started from a couple of really interesting stories that Jack Kirby and Stan Lee created, and it just kind of rolled into now Kang seems to be the next Thanos-like villain in the Marvel Comics universe, which I think is a great idea. I've always loved the character of Kang, but it's good. It's so easy, as Scott was pointing out earlier. If you don't do that right, you can really screw it up. If
Did you ever read a
if you
comic
don't have
series?
it planned perfectly, it won't come together.
No, it won't.
Did you ever read a comic series called Avengers Forever?
Yes.
I haven't. No.
Yeah,
you
might want to.
I have it in my collection, but I haven't read it because
that deals a lot with the Kang. It covers a lot of the Kang time travel storylines and stuff. What?
Right. Kurt.
So it's like
wrote it. Yeah.
It's a maxi series. It's really good. That was what really got me into Kang the Conqueror. But I think that
I have it in my collection, but I haven't read it. Yeah.
I was so sad to see the artist of that passed away recently. I can't remember Paco. I can never say his last name.
Yeah.
He was a monster of an artist.
Pacheco.
Yeah.
That
guy was
like.
The way he does hands and stuff.
I just want to break his hands. I just want to break his hands. He's so good.
He was one of those artists that just made it look easy. Oh man, I love that guy's work. I was so sad when I heard him pass.
It just like it effortlessly comes off the end of his pencil.
It reminded me a lot of like Alan Davis in a way. Sort of smoothness or whatever.
And Adam Hughes, it's got some of that feel to it.
A lot of smooth.
It's from that school of comic book art. Yeah.
So I mean, I got it for the art, but the storyline I thought was the one thing I liked about Kang, and I think they did in Avengers Forever, is the fact that he was battling one of the Avengers, and he brought armies from all timelines. So he had like Vietnam fighters, Civil War stuff, and I thought that was. I hope they do that in the movie. That it's very easy for them to mess up the movie. They destroyed Thanos in my eyes.
I'm betting that this story is probably based on that Avengers Forever. The eventual thing that they do. And I hope that's what they do. Yeah. And it would be great if they would introduce a real Doctor Doom instead of the kind of.
Well, I still don't understand why they still took out the whole. Oh, Doctor Doom! Like Thanos loved death and killed half the universe, and I thought, oh, maybe that's not Disney-fied enough. Then they come out with that Night of the Werewolf show and Moon Knight. So I'm like, well, it's not the horror aspect. So now I'm really curious. Why did you decide to completely rewrite Thanos' backstory and make him into a wuss? He was a wuss in the movie. Thanos does not cry. I'm sorry. It's just when I saw him, I'm like, he's the Mad Titan. He doesn't. So I have.
They didn't go. They didn't go that way. They didn't go that way, which
they went a different way
too. But it's the Marvel Comics universe. It's not the comics. The comics are still there. Those characters are still there. This is a different universe.
A time traveling villain. You brought something up, Rob, with your answer that brings to mind another great time travel story. There was a film that was called Time After Time, where H.G. Wells himself is a character in the film and actually uses his time machine to hunt down Jack the Ripper, who comes to our time period, who escapes into the future. And it was a brilliant, just a weird kind of sleeper hit among sci-fi fans. And it's actually worth watching. I don't know if it holds up as well today, because it is like late
old.
70s.
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie Frequency? Which is another good Frequency.
Which one?
Frequency.
Yes.
Yeah. That was another good, and that was such a fascinating, because it wasn't really time travel. He was just able to, that radio somehow was able to talk to the past, which I thought was such a cool idea. They weren't actually time traveling, but by working together in the future and past, they can make it. And I thought that was such a cool concept. It was a really good movie.
Calculus gives you a great compliment here, Rob. His art's so good, I just want to break his hands. No violence here, kids. Rob Davis, note to self: do risk showing Rob art at a con.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
That's great. That's a great
compliment. Of course, I'm
Yeah.
joking. I wouldn't do that for real, but yeah.
Indeed.
I don't know. It depends on the artist. I might carry a small hammer. So when they put their hand down, it's just a quick snap.
Yeah, that's actually based on a comment that a friend of mine made at a convention one time. Is that this young kid had started drawing comics, and these artists who had been around for a while and been struggling and working hard at it. And this guy just came along and just started drawing like crazy. And they said, "We want to break his hands."
Yeah.
So that's where that came from. He was just so good. He was so intimidating about how easy he made it that they wanted to just break it. So
a lot of those guys, I see a lot of artists that become super good like that. Sometimes rarely make it because it comes so easy and they don't feel challenged that they just kind of bow out of the race. They're not in it, like the struggle, so they just like whatever. I've seen so many artists that just like whatever, and just bow out.
You know what happens.
I know two guys that's happened to where they were actually very, very talented, and they were afraid of success. You could tell that's what it was. They were just afraid that Well, and there's also there's always that little voice talking to you. You're not as good as you think you are. You're not as good as you think you are.
Yeah,
if you listen to that voice
that
enough,
was me.
That was Aaron.
Yeah, that was me.
That was Aaron.
So that you're the one.
Now we know.
Yeah.
Calculus says DC Legends of Tomorrow was a decent enough time travel show, in my opinion, for the first few seasons.
Yeah.
A lot of people like that show. I didn't really watch it. I think part of it is what you said. A lot of it, afraid of success. I think the other thing we don't know about is a lot of these guys are so talented, they get scooped up by Hollywood and a lot of production companies,
some of them
advertising agencies, and they're paid a lot more.
Good for them.
For working a lot less.
That's cool. I'm glad. I'm happy for them.
Calculus says, I feel like that's what happened to Peter David. What he was so good, he was like, this is below me. Although he still writes some stuff. He really does.
He's been, although he recently has had some health problems.
Yeah,
he's even got a GoFundMe out there.
Yeah,
he's got a GoFundMe out there that raised all the money in like 3 days.
One artist who was extremely talented, but I had to give him all the respect because he worked as hard as Perez. That guy, he earned it because he was at that table all the time. So it wasn't so much jealousy.
When he started,
he was amazingly talented, but he just hunkered down and got the work. I mean, the guy was like work ethic and embodied,
personified. Absolutely. Dale,
and then he went out of class act as well.
Man,
what a guy.
Dale says another fave, Phineas and Ferb's Quantum Boogaloo. Now, Scott, since you know this gentleman, and I use the word loosely because I don't know him, I'm to assume the best of people before I meet him.
Dale Cure has a
cartoon. Yeah.
Phineas and Ferb is Adventure Time, Gravity Falls, Phineas and Ferb. My goodness, Phineas and Ferb is one of the best cartoons ever. And yes, the time travel episode. I'm probably mashing pieces of it together, but I feel like the sister Candace steals the machine, and hilarity ensues. Of course, that cartoon, man, Phineas and Ferb is fantastic and so funny. Every episode is just gold. So I don't remember. I'm sure there's plenty of plot holes in the cartoon time travel.
Now, there's another odd take on time travel where it's psychological and mystical. There was a film called Somewhere in Time.
That was a nice one.
Is that Christopher Reeve?
Yeah, Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour. Do you remember that one, Roberta? It's a good romance.
I do. Movie. Yeah, I remember. It was like a lot of suffering. It was sad.
Do you remember how Christopher Reeve travels in time? Because I thought that was the coolest part.
It wasn't like, I think I saw this. Wasn't the one he kept coming back to her in time, but she never realized he knew he was time traveling, but she did not.
Correct.
I think
He
it was
kept
something
meeting
like that,
her
yeah.
over and over again. Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
It was like
he
this
fell in
clandestine-
love with her
Right.
almost from a photograph, and then he knows he's got some connection with her, but he wants to unravel the mystery as to why.
Yeah, because
So
I remember he
he
just would come visit her, and then she would never able to follow him or know where he lived. It would just
right, right. So it was a tragic romance. It was a star-crossed lovers kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the cool part to me was, in order to travel, he simply surrounded
Just
himself.
think about it.
Well, he surrounded himself with the artifacts from that period. I think it was 19th century. He would dress in those clothes.
Yeah.
And he would listen to the music, right? And then, so he would put
He like wished himself there.
Almost a hypnotic version of time travel. And I remember it not only because, Jane
that
Seymour
was strange.
Was very, very much one of those ethereal beauties, and it still is today, but also because that was the oddest time travel story I'd ever seen.
That is weird.
You
It is kind of an interesting idea that you literally could almost alter time by the artifacts emanating some sort of energy, or the artifacts warping time,
or the force
itself.
of will. The force of your will would
you
put
even
you
have
in
to
another
think, like,
place.
is he even really there, or is he just projecting
exactly
a part of himself back through time?
Now that I think about it, that was love. I think that made
that'll work.
Do it.
Yeah, I mean,
when in doubt,
you go through
love.
Instead of the science thing, you go through the mystical thing. You do the love. I mean, a romantic time traveler. That's kind of
what was the
well.
word
There's
with,
have you guys
Jackman.
read or seen that new series Outlander based on the books?
Yeah, she goes back. She goes back
fantastic idea.
What's that one like? What's the premise?
Well, she goes to these stones, and
she has some kind of embodied ability through her genes,
and it's only
some
certain
people can.
Yeah, they go to these stones and they like almost synchronize with her. And then when she first goes there, it was like, I think after her husband broke up with her or something, she goes there, she's distraught, and she falls asleep and wakes up in the past, but she has no idea she's in the past. So she starts wandering in the forest, and I think she encounters Jamie for the first time. I think that's his name.
Yeah, Jamie.
And so she has no idea. And later she figures out how she got there. She does eventually meet other people that are able
and the
to pass
ancestor of her husband, who is strangely evil. And so
yes, that was the guy which was the most evil scene. Yeah, there is, and it's weird because I've watched the TV show enough, and the story that it is like this sort of lineage of stuff taken through past and present. And I think, doesn't Jamie go to the future in one of the books or something? Yeah.
So I mean, they actually end up with children that go back to rescue them. So they end up in the past and separated and come back together.
Just like 9 books or something.
And one of the weirder stories is, just the fact that the children, their youngest children, which is their grandchildren, they didn't know could you be pregnant and go through the stones, or shouldn't you try it? Or where do you actually end up? Can you steer it with your thoughts, or is it just, who knows where you end up?
It almost,
or when.
Yeah. Well, it almost reminded me, the stones reminded me of like the sort of idea of like fae myths or something, like fairy stones.
It kind of was like that.
Yeah,
like Stonehenge.
There's no real reason
it was Stonehenge
why these work or how they work. It's just some people can go back and some cannot.
But they had to have gemstones with them because it would burn it up on the transit.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I got to get going, but it's been a pleasure talking with everyone. And Outlander, I know that show is still going. Yeah, it's definitely a weird one. So, all right.
Yep.
I'll see you guys on
Always a pleasure.
See you next time. Later. Now he's gone. Now we can
nice to have him.
He's gone.
No, I love
wait, Dean. Dean, we gotta.
knows.
We got to do our James Bond tie-in, our 2 degrees of James Bond.
Okay, talk to me.
You just talked about her, huh?
Jane Seymour.
Jane Seymour was in one of my favorite Bond movies, Live and Let Die.
Live and Let Die.
Yes.
Roger Moore's first, correct?
Roger Moore's first appearance as James Bond. Yeah, in fact,
her powers are a little odd and a little of the time.
Again, that launched her as just really. She was one of those sex symbols of the late 70s, early 80s, along with Farrah Fawcett, and and it was just one of those. She became an icon of the romantic lead, primarily in period films,
Yeah.
where there was a lot of costume drama, a lot like Orlando Bloom is now.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
but anyway, see how I jumped forward like 30 years.
Very much.
Yeah,
Talk about time travel.
Seamless segue, right? That's what I do.
It's a good segue.
Thank you.
Speaking of Orlando Bloom,
right? What
time?
No, I say that because it's a joke. I think amid the genre crowd that Orlando Bloom only succeeds if he's in a period film. If he does a contemporary film, no one goes to see it. I mean,
his first film, right? But I think was filmed before it came out after Black Hawk Down. I think he was in that before Lord of the Rings.
Right. But that didn't really launch him.
Right, but it came out. But I think it came out after. But yeah, he's
interesting.
Yeah. He's like a normal person, right? And he's like American.
Yeah, an American. A Brit playing American again?
They're always stealing our actors' jobs.
See, that's what I'm
British
saying.
coming here, taking our.
I know they've trod the boards and they've done all the theater. That's why they're just better. I don't know. They've mastered the language.
Theater helps, doesn't it?
It really does help.
Well, theater.
It's a theater. It's a theater.
They did a really nice remake of Stephen King's 11/22/63. If you've seen it,
I've not. That sounds interesting.
So yeah, they had it. It was, I don't know when the movie or when the show was. It was like just a few episodes.
Okay.
And I think they had it on Netflix, if I remember.
And what was the premise? Remind us of
trying to prevent the assassination
of JFK.
JFK. But it's such a weird story about how it's like a specific location that if you get there, there's an invisible door, and you end up on the other side of it, and you can come and go.
Oh wow!
But you have to know where the door
interesting.
is.
That is interesting.
But if you go, you age there and you come back older. So that's a problem.
I was going to approach that the wages of time travel, the cost of time travel.
That has so many implications of like how exactly would you function over there?
Yeah,
I
know, right?
I've not seen it. I'm sorry. What's the Adam Sandler movie with the remote where he can speed up and pause time? And
I haven't seen that one either. I'm not.
Where he's God or something.
No. I'm sorry, but I remember though. Like he keeps aging, so like he tries to pause things. And
I didn't see that. That sounds funny.
And he ends up missing important stuff because he fast forwards through it, and so I'm sorry.
It was called a Click. Oddly enough, it was called
okay.
Click.
I think doesn't he go into like Bed Bath and Beyond, and he goes to the Beyond?
It's bizarre, very bizarre. Yeah. Another sleeper. Interesting.
Yeah. I didn't say it was good. I just remember the premise.
Just remember the premise.
I like the Narnia time travel where you can live in one world, grow old, come back and be there's a which
where
episode
you were.
Yeah, there's a which Star Trek episode Picard lives a whole life, right? And then comes
the
back.
Inner Light.
There you go.
That's the name of it. The Inner Light.
Very good. Very good. I do agree with Calculus here. Those pond crossing Brits taking our acting jobs. So true.
Unfair. So true. That's why I can't get into the industry. There's too many. It's just saturated with the English, and I don't know what.
Always have to do more.
Just work on your British accent.
I'm trying. It always devolves into pirate. That's all of my accents go from English to Irish to pirate.
We're gonna all have to talk like this for one show and see if we can keep it up for the entire.
Oh boy, I know it's unsustainable.
Certainly. I mean, we'll make complete fools of ourselves to our British friends. But still,
all of my Dungeons and Dragons accents go to that too. And then some sort of weird Mary Poppins Cockney, Dick Van Dyke.
Step in time.
Chim Chimney, Chim Chimchery.
Apologies to everybody, not just the British.
Not just the British.
Everybody.
Right. The best way to learn how to speak British is watch watch Monty Python and the Holy Grail over and over and over, and you'll get every level of British accent.
And there is something funny. I don't think the British find their accents as funny as we do, but like watching the British Top Gear is hilarious. Watching American Top Gear,
not so much.
Not
so much.
But good
calculus.
point.
I'm not sorry. Not at all.
Right.
Not all, Peter. You're welcome on this show anytime, bro. We'll just go back and forth. You can make fun of our accent. We'll make fun of yours.
I have British. Sorry, not to keep on this British thing too long, but I have distant British cousins who I found out existed. A couple of years ago, went to a Triumph motorcycle convention and was able to go visit them in Cornwall. Very cool. But I never thought that I wouldn't be able to understand them. I have this second cousin up and over, Cornish cousin, and he would he'd say something, and then he'd smile and go, and I have no idea what you just said. I have no clue. I'm so sorry. You're speaking
next time that
English.
Just look at him and say, "Brilliant." Yeah, that's all you got to say, and they get it. That's their compliment.
I'm so sorry.
Everything. Brilliant.
Anyways, wow, that was a digression. I'm sorry.
That's all right. We have to have those. It makes life interesting.
We're talking time travel.
We were trying to talk time travel.
We are talking time travel. I do think that the Terminator series
excellent.
Did an excellent job with time travel. Because what we did was we turned time travel into a villain embodied in the Terminator itself, and then also in the second film primarily, all of a sudden Sarah Connor becomes this action hero, and to see her transformation from targeted victim in the first film to crusading superhero to save the future in the second. It was just brilliant, part 1 and part 2, which is very rare for Hollywood films to up the ante with number 2. But I think I've got to give James Cameron props for 2 part 2s that he really did a great job with, and that's Aliens and Terminator 2.
With the S.
Yeah. Excellent. Both
Aliens 3.
Just don't need to worry about it.
2 is good too.
Why
Back to the
we
Future.
Stop?
Yeah, Back to the Future 2.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's not terrible.
It's not terrible. It's got fun. It's fun. It is not. Is very much the old PG, because there are moments, and I'm like, I watched it with my kids, and I was like, oh, this is a little PG-13, a little bit more, and it's a little depressing because you're like his mom and Biff and like
don't really
but yeah, it was a good continuation. And I remember, I guess I haven't watched it probably since it was on VHS. So 3, I haven't watched 3 in a long time. So I remember enjoying it. I remember liking it, but I guess I have to go back and analyze it a little more. But
did anyone see Interstellar?
Oh, I haven't seen that.
I have not yet. I want to see that.
Talk to us about that, Roberta. I think you could probably do the best job of summarizing that. What did you feel about Interstellar? What was the premise? Let's start with that.
To look at Matthew McConaughey.
That's pretty much
it was
from
just
all
his face.
All the ladies that told me about the film. It's about Matthew. So,
the plot's like secondary.
The plot's secondary to Matthew's face.
Matthew wanted not being cool, right? Isn't it about he sacrifices for the mission? He knows he's never going to see her again because of time travel. It's not really time travel. I was going to get there. It's the wages of going the speed of light.
Yeah, it's
you don't know
time
what
dilation,
happen.
I think is what it's called.
Yes, good call.
That's
Rob.
a word. Yeah.
Yes, excellent. So as you travel, the conceit is if you travel the speed of light, time alters differently here than it does at your destination. So when you come back, everyone you know and loved is going to be gone, and you may be the same. But
it's the theory of relativity. It's general relativity.
They tried, I think, to be very accurate with their
yes, they went more science based than fantasy based. Speaking of science based, not Army of Darkness. Says. How about that time travel movie, kids?
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God!
So many good suggestions from him. This is
talk about.
If you're taking notes out there, people, please jot these down.
Yes, very very wacky. I always thought Bruce Campbell movies were just meant to be popcorn movies and enjoyed for fun.
They are fun.
And
Briscoe County Jr. should have gone on for 10 seasons. That show was fantastic.
I mean, he's just got a great.
You guys remember Briscoe County? Do you remember the show that was on like one season? You guys don't remember Briscoe County?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Never saw it. That's probably why it went off.
It was well, what, early 90s, Dean?
Mid
90s. Okay,
maybe,
one season, maybe two. A Western.
That's a rough period in my life.
give us the premise.
Well, it was.
What was it about?
It's a Western, the typical Western tropes, railroad, gunslingers, all this sort of stuff. And his dad gets killed by a band of bandits. And there's a little bit of, there's this weird object that is like, gives people superpowers, but it kills them. There's some sci-fi, but the show is a little self-aware. They make a lot of there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek. It was really well written. And it was that Bruce Campbell kind of humor, that little bit of deadpan. It was good.
93, 94. So yeah, you were right. Earlier 90s than I remembered it. Yeah, I think I caught it on the reruns. There's also there's some of these films you don't remember, but there's one called Donnie Darko.
I love that one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Talk about a weird cult favorite that really gained a lot of steam long after its release. And it built a sort of cult following on the internet where theories and explanations made the film much like the Blair Witch Project. The theories and the cult of fandom around the film almost overwhelmed the film itself. You can still find Donnie Darko explanations, what the movie means, and the time travel. Have you ever seen it? Have you guys seen this?
Yeah, it's really fantastic.
It's very.
I've read a lot about it, but
Jake Gyllenhaal plays an individual named Donnie Darko, and he's in high school, and he's going through the typical high school issues, and he keeps having these awful visions. And through the course of the film, you realize that he's out of time, and there's a warning coming from the future in the form of the scariest bunny rabbit you've ever seen. I know it sounds odd, but the scary bunny is terrifying. Look it up. And at any rate, again, it's a time travel movie, so it falls right within our wheelhouse. But one of the most odd, almost student film type of films where it's kind of hard to follow the first time through. You almost want to watch it twice. Very eerie and dark, oddly.
Dark. It is very dark.
It's very dark.
And he finds this book by a science teacher.
Yeah.
That talks about time travel so that he can figure out more about it.
Right. It's just very odd, but interesting in its time travel theory, because it almost has a spiritual side along with the sci-fi side. Remember, we were talking about wishful time travel in the tradition of Somewhere in Time. It has a little bit of that too. It even has a Hamlet-esque ghost. I don't want to give anything away, but there's a lot to it. Our illustrious
the science teacher's name was Roberta.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
Roland. I'm sorry.
Roland chimes in with Blair
this
Witch.
This might get me fired. This might get me fired.
Say is Blair Witch is so bad.
Blair Witch is an amazing film.
Blair Witch experiment.
It was interesting.
Blair Witch has the final scenes of Blair Witch have me shuddering to this day.
But the things that people copy for it have ruined a lot.
Oh yeah, it's become it's
made
laziness.
Farce.
Yeah, it's become.
It was a. Here we go again with we're off the rails again, but it's fun, so we're going to stay there.
Okay, we'll allow it.
We'll allow it. The nice thing about it was a product of its time. The burgeoning internet was first getting started, so this was an experiment on promotion and marketing. They built up this whole idea that this was truly found footage. So a lot of folks went to the movies thinking, "Hey,
my
this was
wife,
real
then
found
girlfriend, we went, and I knew it. I had read about it, and she had never even heard of it. And we went and sat down and watched this movie. My girlfriend, she's, what is going on? What is this? And it was, you couldn't look stuff up back. I mean, the internet was very new. You didn't just
the
look
early primitive age of the internet. I mean, blockbusters were still around. That's how long. So everything's pre-blockbuster or post.
I remember. Speaking of Blockbuster, when Netflix came out, Blockbuster started to try to emulate that. Do you guys remember that? You'd get 2 discs in the mail. You could go to the Blockbuster. You could turn them in at the Blockbuster. They would scan them. That would trigger the discs to come. The next ones come in the mail, and you could take 2 off the shelf. Exactly. It was incredible. Ooh, it was real. I suspended my Netflix account until our Blockbuster went out of business.
That on the wrong horse there, Scott.
You had discs like in the interim, and then you would go back with the ones from the shelf and the ones that came in the mail. Give 4 discs back. Do the whole thing. It was really, but it was too little, too late. Those are the heady days of 2000.
I liked Blockbuster too. I enjoyed them. But streaming took over once the internet got fast enough, and we didn't have to plug it into our phone in order to get the internet. I would make awful sound.
Remember the AOL things you get?
Oh, you get the 900 minutes of online.
This is painful. Just painful.
I might still have some.
I remember my Netflix queue for a little while was all Ernest Borgnine movies, and they kept coming. And again, my wife, she's like, "Can we switch away from Ernest Borgnine?" I was like, "I don't know what's coming next. It could be Ice Station Zebra. Could be Harvey. I have no idea."
Wow. Okay, there's a movie about time travel no one's mentioned yet called 12 Monkeys.
Oh, yeah, that's a weird one too.
What'd you guys think of that? Terry Gilliam of Monty Python fame, who does some of his movies are weird, some of his movies are successful, some are just very unique.
All weird.
And his own vision. Well, Time Bandits. I mean, he did Time Bandits, which is another.
I wish I liked that week before he does it. But
Time Bandits. I wish I like Time Bandits because it checks all the marks.
It does.
Of movies I like, but I can't get through it. It's so it's ponderous. I
hear you.
I'm sorry. I wish it's got all the Monty Python people in it.
Well, I know. Who doesn't love Monty Python, right?
John Cleese as Robin Hood, and
I mean, how cool is that? But here's another one that you may not think of as a time travel movie: Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
For sure.
But again, based on a French novel.
Get your hands off me, you dirty ape. Dr. Zaius.
Yeah. But the thing about that film is it's the stinger at the end.
Yeah.
That's all about the stinger at the end.
Oh my God.
Charlton Heston's,
I was wrong. It was Earth. All along. You did it. Yeah, man, it's so it falls right into the bizarre social messaging of the sci-fi at the time, which was really made it very powerful and weird. There were some Twilight episodes that did a great job with time travel.
Soylent Green people. And the original I Am Legend is actually called the Omega Man.
Oh, right? Omega Man,
right.
Yes.
And that's a great story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There was a movie called
have
Looper.
One more. Oh, Looper, yeah.
Remember Looper?
Oh,
that was pretty good.
It's an interesting premise. I like the premise of it.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Roberta?
I was going to say I just thought of one which I thought was really interesting. And it was a big flop, but I liked it.
Okay.
John Carter.
Oh,
well done.
That's not time travel, though. That's
more dimension.
Yeah,
space travel.
He's like space travel.
Yeah, he falls asleep and wakes up. But yeah, I never saw the movie. I've actually
not as bad as the reviews.
You should get it. Yeah.
Okay.
If you can find it for $5 in one of the Walmart bins or something, pick it up. It's worth having. It's a great
fun
film.
to watch.
It was so interesting. Such an adventure.
The original John Carter novels, written by Edgar Rice Burroughs, the guy who created Tarzan. I could not get through that book because you've always got that level of willing suspension of disbelief,
and then crazy.
The travel to Mars in the novel just stopped me cold. It was astral projection.
Yeah.
And I went, what?
Yeah.
So it just pulled me completely out of the story, and I couldn't read it. So, but the movie does a much better job of how it handles the travel. It's actually science-based rather than gobbledygook-based.
I like listening to a lot, all the public domain books on, there's an app that they're free, and I
Kindle.
I can't think what? No, well, there's one of them that's audiobooks.
Audible,
free.
Is it Audible?
Not Audible. I'm sorry,
there's
a free
one.
There's a free one.
There's a free one. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know what it. I can't
Sometimes they're good. Sometimes they're really quality, and then the next book will be awful, and you can't even hear it. But I mean, you get what you pay for. But I like listening to all those old.
Yeah, because those should all be in public domain now. At least the early ones are, because the first 2 or 3 Tarzan books are now in public domain. So.
I believe so. I want to welcome Brent.
Well, that's
Brent.
good.
Hi, Brent.
Welcome, my friend. Good to see you.
Hi, Brent.
As you can probably guess, we're talking time travel, and I'd really love to get your take on, maybe one of your favorite time travel stories, and then maybe a not so favorite, and why on both.
LibriVox. Sorry.
LibriVox.
It's a free.
Yes.
Free.
I've heard of
They
it.
read public domain. Yeah. Sometimes they're quality, and sometimes they're just. Sometimes people put sound effects in, and they sound horrible.
Oh,
all right. Brent, time travel. Sorry.
Brent, time travel. Talk to us, my friend.
Time travel is tough. I can't wrap my head around it. You remember you probably mentioned it in Avengers Endgame when the Hulk starts explaining how when you go into the past, your past becomes your future, and my brain can't do it. I'm like, you're talking. Because if you are talking about going into the past to change the past, then the past has already been changed. So, and then it's so fun. Like, have you guys? Of course, you've seen Back to the Future 2.
Of course,
never heard of it.
Don't just take my word for it. I won't make you go and see that movie because it's just a lot of nonsense. But basically, Doc Brown starts to explain about the diverging timelines. It takes him like 5 minutes, and we're all going, dude, we know how it works in the movies. We know that's not true, but we know it works. You don't have to explain it anymore, and yet he does. Oh, man.
We covered that the coolest part of the Back to the Future movies for some of us is the DeLorean and the idea that what a cool time travel machine,
and why you have to get to 88.
Why? And as if a DeLorean could actually hit 88 miles per hour, that car. No.
Well, there's that. They weigh 5,000 pounds
with a horrid.
It had a different engine.
Yes, that
exactly.
Doc Brown's DeLorean
flux capacitor
does not have the
flux
original
capacitor. Yeah,
that's right.
Rotax or whatever was in that.
That changed everything. Well, we covered, Brent. We did cover a lot of the classic or modern classic comics like Days of Future Past with X-Men and Flashpoint and these sorts of things. So in the comic universe, are there any time travel stories that kind of stand out for you that you liked?
This is not a great example, but for some reason it pops into my head. Do you guys remember the Joss Whedon run on Astonishing X-Men?
Yeah.
Do you remember when they're in the it's the last arc he did when the X-Men are actually flying to this alien planet to stop this Armageddon from happening. And they have a conversation that's kind of a funny conversation. But the following issue, you find out that they have figured out that they're being being spied on psychically.
Oh.
So what they do is the same panels, but with different word balloons overlaying the words they're actually saying. And it's not really a time travel story, but it's a way to kind of do the Groundhog Day effect.
Okay.
In comics. And I remember reading it and going, that is just one of the smartest things I've ever seen.
And
in
to
comics.
That's the way to catch up on
right?
deadlines too. For an
It's like a best of show or a flashback episode, right?
Yeah, kind of. And the thing is, you can just reprint them, and then you've got it. No big deal. But they actually changed the story by telling the same story and saying this is the story behind the other story, and it was just so smart. And so that's one way to go. I don't know.
There's another one that we covered a little bit earlier that you might like to comment on. Was we spoke a little bit about H.G. Wells, The Time Machine, and we mostly agreed that what was so charming about it was the fact he didn't feel the burden to explain it. It just, you push the lever forward and you move forward in time. You push it way forward and you move forward faster in time. And so again, because he didn't want to waste a lot of energy on this sort of what I call scientific justification when you're telling a fantasy story. Sometimes you can get bogged down in those things. How did you feel about H.G. Wells' take on time travel?
I'm not as familiar with it, but I know enough to know that, frankly, any movie or comic that's going to try to over-explain how it all works and over-explain anything is destined for fans leaving, because Star Trek fans like that, and they're like the only ones. And I don't care how it works; just make it work.
Now, sometimes some of us go, "Oh, come on, stop the technobabble. Get on with the story." Yeah, you don't need all that. No, you really don't.
And half the time you're like, yeah, whatever you say. Remember, did you guys ever see Time Cop?
Yeah.
You remember when Ron Silver is saying, okay, make sure you don't touch your future self or you'll somehow melt. And I'm like, really?
Yeah, that's a new rule. All of a sudden, it's a
new
rule.
It's a rule.
How would anyone know that?
Blowing my mind. Yeah. So
somebody did it.
Yeah. But, it was written about somewhere. Right.
One thing I should say about like Days of Future Past, and I've mentioned this a couple times in this podcast, the best thing about that storyline was how basically pure it was. It was very smart, but it was very basic, because you can't go hugely nuanced in comics, I think. And I know this because they did do you remember when they did the sequel? They did it across a lot of annuals, and they had the Fantastic Four in there too. They call it Days of Future Present.
Yes.
You guys remember that?
Yep.
Because I don't. I just remember that they did it. And
that's what I remember too. They did it.
Yeah. And I just remember thinking, this is not going to go the distance like Days of Future Past did, because Days of Future Past was just really cool. It's in the future. The Sentinels patrol. They kill all the mutants. They corral them. And what are we going to do? And I don't even remember what they did. But, the art was great. The story was very basic. And as a result, it worked great. Everybody.
Do you remember, Brent, that thing was just 2 issues. And it made such an impression that not only was a major motion picture made of it, but even the cartoon covered the Days of Future Past. So, we keep coming back to that. Obviously, the snap, the infamous snap of Thanos and the Avengers and so on, could be construed as a type of time affecting story, although it's more reality altering, right? But then, of course, with the multiverse created as a result, then in Doctor Strange 2, that's weird.
Multiverse of madness.
Yeah, well, to blend the multiverse with time, and then seeing all the Spider-Man and all of that, it really can get confusing, where the fireworks show overwhelms any sort of internal logic, to the point where if anything can happen, there's no risk, which is always my problem with level 25 magic and too much time travel and dimensional travel. It's like anything can happen, and so if anything can happen, then nothing's really that. I don't know. How do you
there's
build
no risk. There's no conflict. And
that's the entire problem with Marvel's Phase 4, basically.
Talk about that a little bit.
Remember when Kevin Feige got up at Comic-Con and said, we're doing the multiverse, and And I remember thinking, okay, and we're already mostly done with phase 4. And it was like you had to announce, okay, and we're done. Oh, really? We were in the middle. Okay. But the point being that now you suddenly have a mechanism by which you don't have to tell emotionally deep stories anymore. You just tell interesting stories. What if Doctor Strange wandered into the animated universe, which he did for like 3 frames? And what if the Illuminati runs things? What if this and that? And what if is interesting? But if you even think about it in terms of comics, they didn't have an ongoing what if series that told one story. They had 1-issue stories because you could read it and be done. I don't, what would happen if Invisible Girl died in childbirth? Now I know. Now you know 5 issues to tell me. So,
well, see, that's the thing. Let's even use the Bard as an example, right? I mean, what if Hamlet's mom, didn't marry his uncle? And okay, well, so what? I mean, that's the whole point. Is great stories are great because of the specific events that took place and the character reaction. And what if it might be an interesting conversation over adult beverages hanging out, but it rarely makes for compelling stories. I think that's just me.
Yeah.
I always feel like canon. I don't know. Do you find yourself asking that sometimes? Like, is this canon or is this not canon? With some of these franchises that kind of go off the rails, and you're like, is this canon or are they just having fun here? Because
Star Trek has gotten too wrapped up in that. Is that everything's got to be canon? And I'm going, no, it doesn't. The first season of Star Trek, the way that the ship was propelled were like 3 different ways.
Right. So, and they hit like warp 15 and they, the star date wasn't consistent. Yeah.
The star dates were all over the place.
They were all, it was all crazy like that. You don't need any of that. That started with Marvel Comics when they started doing all the crossovers and then suddenly everything has to fit together. No, it doesn't. Just tell a good story.
I think
if it fits in continuity, cool. If it doesn't, it's a good story. Just enjoy it. Golly,
enjoy the story for what it is. Right? A cohesive universe tends to be a little bit too overbearing, and perhaps taps into a lot of OCD that people have.
Stifles storytelling, I think.
Yeah, it's like comparison robbing you of joy, isn't that? Don't you feel that that's the same type of? You ever heard that phrase? Comparison robs you of your joy, and there's a lot of truth to that. You should just do what you love and don't worry about
I think there's a lot of that on the internet. Everyone's so tied up in, it violates what happened in the comics.
Yeah.
Well, the comics are still there. The comics are still there. It's a movie. It's different. It's a different universe.
It's an adaptation.
Think of it that way and you're okay.
That's what I have to do with books I love. Books I love. When they make a movie, I have to think of them as separate.
Separate, because it hurts.
Don't you?
Yeah, because I can't be like, because I will fall in a book. You have all that time and space to fall in love with somebody, to love, like you're emotionally invested, and then they ruin that. Like the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Voyage of the Dawn Treader is one of my absolute favorite books ever. The movie is one of my most hated movies ever. I hate it. And because I am in love with those, I'm invested with those characters from the first book to Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Silverchair. In the movie, they're idiots. It's stupid. But now that's an extreme example. Lord of the Rings, love the books. The movies, really, really, really love and like. And there are parts that I have to be like, okay, it's its own thing.
It's different. It's different. It's a different story. It's a different story entirely. A good example of that in my house is The Shining. My wife is a big Stephen King fan, and the Jack Nicholson, The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's Shining. I loved it. I hadn't read the book, and she goes,
it's amazing.
Well, they didn't do this and they didn't do that, and it's not
It
the
can't
book.
be
And I'm going,
literal.
You're
Yeah.
right.
Totally the movie.
It's the movie.
It's the movie. The Harry Potter
And
world.
so
My wife.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I thought Stanley Kubrick is my favorite director, and he did a beautiful film. And it
Talk about another movie.
But
well,
it's not the
Stephen
book.
King didn't like it.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
he hated it too.
Yeah, he
That's
was
another
angry.
movie seared into my soul. Those two little girls and the boy on the big wheel. I saw that way before I should have. I was way too young.
You're too young.
It was on my
Wow.
older brothers.
Scared
Let
the
me
crap
sit with
out
them
of
and
you,
watch
didn't
it. Oh my goodness! To this day,
Mhm.
like there are scenes
So
in that
good.
movie.
It's
I should
creepy.
not have seen it when I
It
was as
is
young as I
creepy.
was. And that's a good
Very
one.
creepy.
The
The
road.
bathtub.
The road book and movie are good. They've done a good job with both of those. Sorry, I don't know why I thought of those, but
Oh,
like
that's
the
good.
road is one of those books that I've reread that just like has got me. And the movie is really good. So there's nothing to do with time travel or
Maybe we should
Yeah,
do a
we
show.
we got off
maybe
on a tangent.
We'll do a
but
podcast on
It's
adaptation.
adaptations.
Yeah.
We'll have to
We
throw
could
that
do
in.
another one of those.
And I
I
can be
know.
of two minds, and it
Mhm.
drives my sister crazy because I can
Mhm.
love a movie,
Yeah.
but then I can nitpick it to death,
Well, sure.
and she can't. It drives her crazy.
Yeah,
like that.
There's medication for that.
I love the Lord of the Rings movies, but then like if I want to compare them to the books or even like their own plot line, there's some stuff in the movies I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And
it's,
um,
Aragorn is a completely different character from the books to the movie.
yeah,
They're two different characters completely.
Well, even
So-
and this will go off the rails for a moment,
Yeah.
just for a moment here. Frodo is really a tougher character in the book, but what they did was they amped up the vulnerability for the film just to sort of make. But he's a tough, scrappy little dude in the book.
It makes sense. It makes sense. But,
Sure.
Also a lot older. Yeah.
He's
There's so many. But yeah, with this for another episode.
For another episode, we'll go into adaptation. But
Adaptation.
back to time travel.
Time travel.
We mentioned something, Brent, I'd love to get your take on as well. The episode of the original series of Star Trek called City on the Edge of Forever is forever seared in my mind as one of the best time travel stories ever told. And my reason for it was because of the emotional impact of the story. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I'm just going to spoil it because it's been out too long. I mean, it's 60 years old, whatever it is.
You have no
spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Basically, the Enterprise, the crew, which it's always the bridge crew, right? They don't send anybody but themselves. So anyway, they go through the Guardian of Forever. They go back into the 30s. They have to do something on 30s Earth. It's right before World War II. Captain Kirk falls in love with an individual who is part of a political movement, and
as is his want.
Yes, as his want. And so, through the unfolding of the storyline itself, she has to die for the future to unfold the way it should. So, the stakes, the stakes are really high. And again, Harlan Ellison wrote the original story. It was altered by Gene Roddenberry and Gene Kuhn as well, as Rob stated earlier in the podcast. But what I loved about it was it really showed, and this is all Shatner pulls it off here because this is before Shatner's just doing a riff on Shatner. He's actually playing Captain Kirk in this particular episode. And you really feel that loss for him. And I remember reading later that it's one of the first times in those days that curse words were allowed. And the censors were having problems with the fact that he says the phrase at the end, "Let's get the hell out of here." Right. And so even back then, we're talking, late 60s, that was kind of, on the edge. But the point was he knew what he had to do, did it anyway. It really affected him. And the way the supporting cast is also affected by it. And even when they're back on the bridge, Shatner does a brilliant job of showing the cost of what they just went through. And I just remember going, okay, I'll remember this episode, forever, to overuse the line. But
Okay.
I just thought it was a good Sitting on the Edge of Forever. If you haven't seen it recently, watch it again. Isn't that great? Calculus says, spoiling original Star Trek episode is like spoiling a Golden Age comic. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect anything else. Good call.
We just affected the timeline. We went back in time to talk about a 60s episode, and we've affected the course of time now that now we know the outcome and
of the enjoyment of someone who maybe had never seen it before. Is that
it's
Brent,
the journey in the story is still worth it, even if you know how it ends.
It really is.
You know what I didn't think about? Star Trek Generations meets Kirk and Picard, but is it time travel because they're in the
ribbon,
the nebula?
Yeah,
ribbon.
That one's a hard one to parse.
It really is.
It's not quite time travel.
Yeah, that does not make any sense to me at all. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and that whole ribbon thing.
That movie is near and dear to my heart.
Really?
I saw that one.
I don't know.
Thanksgiving Day with some family, and the spoiler. Sorry, everybody. The Enterprise D blows up.
That's it.
Crashes.
But remember, First Contact is the big one that had
they a Borg. Yep. And again, if I were the Borg, why not travel back to the beginning of Earth society and just blow up Earth? Don't go to Zephram Cochrane. Go back 1,000 years.
Yeah, but Scott, then you would get into the whole argument of, well, if Gandalf knew that all they had to do is drop the ring in the fires of Mount Doom, just get the eagle to carry the ring over Mount Doom and just drop it in.
The eagle, there's Nazgul on flying pterodactyls out there. The eagles are not going to do it. If I was an eagle,
this is before.
They're
still on
way back. Okay,
way back, right?
So
just throw it in, But I mean, I love it when people do that because I go, then it's not a story,
right?
But First Contact feeds into the one thing about time travel movies and comics that I just hate, and I can't believe no one gets more riled about it, is when someone tells another character something they are going to do in the future.
Yes.
It ruins everything, doesn't
it? But they do that to Cochrane. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, okay. And Back to the Future, when Marty is jamming on the guitar and Marvin Berry holds out the phone.
Yeah.
We talked about that before you came in.
Is great. Go ahead.
So who invented rock and roll?
Right.
Was it what's his name? Not Marvin Berry, his brother.
Chuck
Berry.
His cousin is on the phone. Yeah. It's your cousin, Marvin Berry.
I love that.
Did Marty invent it? No, he heard it from Chuck Berry. and then suddenly, so in the new Star Trek, Spock is telling Scotty, young Scotty, in the future you're going to invent the thing that makes warping possible while you're traveling. And I'm like, well, then he didn't invent it. Obviously,
he didn't. Someone told him.
Yeah, but he didn't tell him how he did it.
This happens so much in the movies, and I'm like,
Star Trek 4, Kirk pawns his glasses that McCoy got.
That's it. I was going to bring that up. Thank you. I was going to bring that up.
What does he say? Something like, "Who's to say I didn't do it already?" Right?
Yeah.
And there's also another one where, Scotty says, who doesn't? He might have invented
when he invents the plexiglass. That whole scene. I'm sorry to again diverge. When Scotty sits down, like he says, "Computer," and he computer. How quaint. Why does he know how to use a QWERTY computer at like warp speed? That scene makes no sense. I love Star Trek 4 though. I'm sorry.
I hear you. Save the whales.
It's a funny film. It's a lot of fun. But
it's a lot of fun. It was a romp.
A tour de force.
Jordan, knowing he would become Parallax, Calculus says, yeah, I get that. For those of you who know, when Hal Jordan was a villain for a while in the continuity. For those of you who are Green Lantern fans.
That's kind of when I gave up on all of that.
Yeah.
I went, really?
You weren't a Kyle Rayner fan, right? No.
No, I was not.
See,
yeah.
Just goes to show you, sometimes things just can go awry.
I was not the target audience.
No, nor was I.
I was not the target audience.
We also mentioned one other way of time travel before you arrived, Brent. I'd love to get your take on it. It was the romantic approach with Somewhere in Time.
Love.
And did you think that was kind of an interesting way to? Do you remember that film with Chris Reeve and Jane Seymour?
I never saw it.
Okay,
It's before your
I'm
time,
not going
Brent.
to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. But if you watch it, it's actually the most unique time travel movie you'll ever see, because it's nothing you've seen before. And it's not that it's whiz bang fireworks version. I'm just saying the concept is very unique.
Yeah.
Is it that he travels back in his, like, he wakes up and he's in another time and there's Medicine Woman and they get together and all?
No.
Superman
Not that simple.
spins the world so fast he meets Medicine Woman.
No, that's not quite that. It's got some emotional depth to it and some good performances by the leads that really, they pull you in. I mean, those of us who are kind of not really into romantic movies just right out of the gate, and you kind of sit down and you go, wow, okay, it's Jane Seymour, so that's cool. And so then you start watching it and you go, okay, all right. So he goes back in time that way. I've never seen that before. Anyway, thought it was worth mentioning. Any final comments before we say goodnight to everyone?
Dean, one more. 2 degrees of Jane Seymour to The Hobbit. Can you connect Jane Seymour to The Hobbit?
Wow.
Ooh.
I'm going to let you do that, co-host. Go for it.
Jane Seymour, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, Orson Bean in the same show. Orson Bean, voice of Bilbo in the Rankin Bass.
Oh my word!
Wow, listen to that.
Didn't know that.
That's probably one of the
6
best
degrees of separation, man.
With Jane Seymour, James Bond to the animated Hobbit. There
See how we got? I mean, look what we can do here. We span the gamut here. We cross worlds, don't we? And
Mind
genres.
blown again.
If
I knew it.
I know. Calculus asked for one last question here. If Superman fly forward, does he reach the future?
I would. Well, yes. The answer is yes. If he can reverse time, he can speed up.
Hopefully,
right?
Yeah. I will say, I saw that movie at 6 years old in a theater and thought, that's dumb. And I go backwards and go back
me both
and by my 6-year-old self.
I imagine Brent as like the Christmas Story Ralphie there with the decoder. Son of a
right. Going this is dumb. Well, guys, we've come to the end of another great broadcast.
What a good one!
Joining us tonight and making this super fun.
Do we know what's next week, Dean?
What's that? You want to tease next week?
Next week?
Oh, I'm gonna be here next week. Let's tease what it's gonna be about next week. We're gonna talk about literary comics next week. We're gonna talk about exactly what elevates a comic book from entertainment to literature.
All right,
and why?
Excellent. So yes, everyone wear your tie, wear an ascot.
Perhaps
we shall practice our diction for
this
episode.
Practice our diction. The rain falls mainly on the plain. And that being said, we're going to say our good night. We're going to say, make mine
Silverline.
Silverline.
Good night, everybody.
I'm Pat Broderick. Make mine Silverline.